Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Rundown. This is episode 9. Today is Saturday, February 27th, 2021. I'm Chris Dixon with InfoWeather Catholic Media. Let's get into it. This week we have weather, sports, COVID-19, and lots of news. This is going to be a long video, so step right in. But now it's on YouTube, and if you go to the YouTube thing at the bottom, either in the description or at the bottom on the scroll bar where you can skip ahead in the video, it'll tell you what each section is, so you can skip ahead to the section that you care about most. Of course, subscribe, like, and comment if it behooves you to. Text us on Remind for Central Ohio and Central Oklahoma, respectively, and follow us on Instagram. This week, in terms of liturgy, not a whole lot. We're wearing purple all week. Second Sunday of Lent this Sunday, third Sunday of Lent next Sunday. We're also looking at a couple commemorations throughout the week, but nothing too wild. Let's get into the weather. Nothing too crazy in terms of winter weather either last week or next week, which is good, especially compared to the winter weather we had 2 weeks ago throughout the United States, including, of course, the big Texas snow. Speaking of Texas, the Dallas area had some hail on Thursday, not just some hail, a decent amount of it. In fact, to the northeast of there, and really more to the east than the northeast, but there was a 2-inch report of hail. That's that black triangle there near the Texas-Oklahoma border in northeastern Texas. They got a little bit of hail on Thursday, so that was definitely big for them. As for tropical weather, we have one current tropical cyclone in the southern Indian Ocean near where that red outline is. Potentially another storm forming there later this week. We also have a moderate risk of a storm forming in the South Pacific. Other than that, pretty quiet this time of year. It's generally the way it is. We'll start picking back up as we head to the northern hemisphere in a couple months from now. Again, March 1st is going to be on Monday, so only a couple more months, 3 more months until hurricane season. Columbus, Ohio, we're looking at the mid-50s this weekend. Rain Sunday morning. We're going to be in the low to mid-40s to start the week. The beginning of the week will be around 50 for the remainder of the week, say Wednesday or Thursday onward. We're also looking at a little bit of rain by the time we get to Friday. As for Norman, that rain's going to come on Thursday. It's also going to come on Monday night. It's also going to come tonight when we could be seeing some storms. We're looking at potentially above 60 today, mid upper 50s for the beginning of the week, nearly 70 in the middle of the week, and then we're going to be around 60 for the rest of the weekend. And it's going to be a long one due to the no school Friday, thanks to having no spring break. In terms of sports, the only thing we have this week is Tiger Woods' car crash. Of course, very brutal and devastating to him. Single vehicle, only person in the vehicle was him. So that's the good news out of it. The bad news is his leg's pretty messed up. Of course, prayers for Tiger. Let's move on to coronavirus video update number 9 of the year. Generally pretty much the same in terms of daily new cases. Some states improved, some states did a bit worse than the previous week per capita. So let's move on to daily new deaths. Most states doing pretty well there. We do see a spike over there in Virginia, but we also saw one in Ohio several weeks ago and Indiana several weeks before that. So it's probably just being caught up in terms of previous deaths that occurred, and that's the reason for the big old spike there. In terms of hospitalizations, everybody doing pretty well across the board. Wyoming, North Dakota, Oregon, Maine, and Vermont doing very, very well in terms of hospitalizations. Looking at infections, the good news is that this projection no longer has us really having a fourth big peak. Perhaps a little bit of a peak there, but we could avoid it altogether. The purple current projection has us not having a peak at all. The red one, you could say we're just flat for a long period of time, perhaps up and down on the day-to-day. Again, we wear a mask, so we're going to get over with this before you even know it. By the beginning of this summer, it's going to be nice. Don't even worry. Just wear your mask and get your vaccine when it's your turn. We'll talk more about the vaccine here in a little bit by the time we get to the U.S. Catholic News section. In terms of isolation and quarantine here at the university, super big decline in the past 2 weeks. Vaccinations also up over 1,000 with that first dose, over 800 with that second dose. For the first time I can remember, no faculty in isolation or quarantine. Students, only 55 out of 27,000 students. So we're making really big progress here, not only at the University of Oklahoma, but I assume throughout most of the United States and most of the universities of the United States. In terms of vaccination across the United States, over 90 million vaccines have been distributed. That's nearly 28% of the population. That's if everybody received only one dose. So that's why it's less than 28% there. In terms of those who have received one dose, 14.2% of the population has done so. New Mexico and South Dakota lead the way there. In terms of people with both of their doses, New Mexico and South Dakota lead the way, as well as North Dakota and West Virginia, above them all right there, with nearly 7% of the population. Over 20 million people have received that second dose. Looking at the variants in terms of the UK, that B117 variant from the UK, I believe that's supposed to be 45 states, not 49 states, and 2,000 cases, over 2,000 cases in the United States alone. Florida, Michigan, California lead the way there. In terms of the South African variant, 15 states now have it. The East Coast and West Coast were the sides that added some more states to the ranks this week. Now 49 cases throughout those 15 states as it stands right now. The P1 variant from Brazil has 5 states and 6 cases. That went up 1 state in just 1 case in the past week. Alaska was the state that joined us. Let's talk about the total cases in the United States. 29 million since the beginning of this thing. Over 500,000 deaths, nearly 20 million recoveries. We're sitting right around 9 million in terms of current cases. We went down around 300,000 just like we did the previous week, which is good news. Every single state, for the most part, went down. There are a few exceptions, as we see in the top 10. Arizona, Virginia, Maryland, and Kentucky all went up from the previous week. South Carolina was ranked 9 last week, but they are no longer reporting recoveries, so they are not ranked this week. That's why they are not on the graph this week. That's it for the United States. In terms of worldwide, we're coming up on 114 million, over 2.5 million deaths, nearly 90 million recoveries, less than 22 million current cases. France, Brazil, Belgium, and Italy all went up from the previous week. The other countries went down. The United States, United Kingdom, and Spain all had a pretty significant decrease. Worldwide, down around 600,000 from the previous week. Serbia, who was ranked among the top 10 last week, is now off the top 10. They're ranked in the 40s or 50s now. That's because something to do with how the cases were done last week. Again, I mentioned last week that they were surprising in the top 10, and now they're out and well below. So it must have just been a bad data point that I chose on that date. Let's take a look at the U.S. news. The only thing we have to talk about is the new USPS truck, which people have been making fun of, as you can see there. We haven't had any new USPS trucks since 1994. This one will hit the road nearly 30 years after that in 2023. It'll have air conditioning finally. It may even be powered by electric, as opposed to, of course, gas as they are nowadays. In addition, it has 360-degree camera, backup camera, all the fancy bells and whistles that you would expect cars of this age to have, except for its design, which looks like crap. Let's move on to Catholic news. We have some fun ones this week. Vaccine morality, immorality, the Catholics in D.C., and more stuff about the Catholics in D.C. So let's start with morality in terms of the vaccine. Your number one option for any vaccine, in this case particularly the COVID vaccine, is to get a vaccine with absolutely no attachment to fetal cell lines. If one of those doesn't exist, which at the moment for COVID-19 it doesn't, then it's morally permissible to get a vaccine which use fetal cell lines in testing. In this case, the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines use them in testing, but not in development. And so they're a bit better than a vaccine that was developed using fetal cell lines. Now, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is probably going to get improved within the next week or two, and the AstraZeneca, I'm not sure what its status is. I mean, it's obviously not approved yet in the United States, and those two vaccines fall into that third category. Again, the higher up you get in terms of numbers there, the better you're doing morality-wise. In any case, no coronavirus vaccines and in no wide-scale vaccines in general have fetal cell lines or fetal remains actually in them, in the physical content of the vaccine. Even in cases 2 and 3 for the COVID vaccine, there's very remote material cooperation with the abortion. And in addition, COVID-19 is a threat to public health. And what we mean by very remote material cooperation is that by very remote, we're so far removed from when those fetuses were used for their stem cells. In the case of Pfizer and Moderna, 1973, I believe in the Netherlands, was where that fetal cell line's from. So it's not the actual cells from that. It's several generations and sciencey things since then. And by material as opposed to formal, we mean that we aren't like directly participating. I mean, direct's a bad word because that's more like the remote thing. But we aren't like really super heavily involved in it in terms of what's actually being done. Like, we aren't profiting directly from the abortion. We're profiting from technology that profited from the abortion, et cetera, et cetera. And again, profit's a bad word because it connotates money, but that is what it is. Let's move on to OnlyFans. For those who don't know, OnlyFans is a paid adult website. A mother of 3 Catholic schoolboys created one of these accounts, and she makes $150,000 a month on it. The children were expelled when the school knew about her account, when the school found out about her account. The school claimed that her quest for high-profile controversy in support of her OnlyFans account was in direct conflict and what we hope to impart of our students and opposed to the handbook. So, that's what they said. Again, this is a Catholic school, so they're private. They can do what they want. And also, it's pretty hard to teach your children or teach children about morality when their mother's on the internet posting pictures of herself. That makes things pretty difficult. And as we know, the first place for theological formation is one's own house, not their school, not their church, their own house where their mother and father are at. So if their mother isn't cooperating with it, it's kind of difficult for the school to get the point of morality across in this case. And she claimed that the account was helping to save her marriage, make it better. They were going through a rough patch, but perhaps that was the case. I don't understand how that works, but okay. Now let's talk about the Department of Health and Human Services. Both of the nominees, the secretary nominee, Xavier Becerra, as well as the assistant secretary nominee, Rachel Levine, I'm not sure what it is. Let's start with Becerra. Becerra is a Catholic from California. He's going to join the DC Heretic Club with our friends Biden, Pelosi, and AOC, all Catholics who teach contrary to the faith while claiming to be Catholic, or at least having ties to Catholicism, not saying they aren't Catholic. You get the point. Becerra won't name any abortion restrictions that he favors. For example, when asked if a baby with Down syndrome should be legally protected, i.e. you can't abort a fetus on the basis that it has Down syndrome, he would say, well, whatever the law says, and didn't give his 2 cents on that. And we shouldn't abort children on the basis of their ability or disability. He did the same thing in regards to their sex. We shouldn't abort children in regards to any condition at all, let alone sex or ability or disability. The assistant nominee, or the nominee assistant, I'm not sure what the phraseology of that is, Secretary for Health and Human Services, is a guy who became a woman, Rachel Levine, whatever. He, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to say he because he was born a he, so that's what I'm going to say. That's what the church would say. He won't say if parents can refuse a child's gender transition, and that's probably because he has gender dysphoria himself. So again, prayers for all people with these tendencies, and not only that, same-sex attraction as well. That we really fervently need prayers, not only for them, but also for a better understanding and support from the church, obviously not in terms of allowing same-sex unions in the church, but in terms of offering support to them and letting them know more publicly that they're loved. Like, yeah, sure, everybody says everybody's welcome in the Catholic Church, but more offering ways for them to help continue to live their lives in a way beneficial, not only to the church, but also to themselves and their calling as human beings. As we get into more of that same-sex attraction and whatnot stuff, then we have the Equality Act, which the House passed this week, 224 to 206, 5 abstentions there, or no votes. I'm not sure what it was, but 5 didn't vote, clearly, because there's 435, right? So it would add sexual orientation and gender identity to the 1964 Civil Rights Act. So basically what that would do is say you can't discriminate on the basis of how somebody feels that they're attracted to somebody else or what somebody feels that their gender is. So it's making feelings something that's legally protected in terms of employment and a slew of other things. As a consequence, the bishops have said that this act promotes marriage contrary to the faith. It also, part of this Equality Act, allows for no pregnancy discrimination, which on its face seems at least somewhat decent until you realize that they could construe this to be an excuse for legal protection of abortion, which could be harmful to the pro-life movement. And Biden said he's going to sign, so if the Senate passes it whenever they get to it, then that's obviously not good news for Catholics in society. But Biden's a Catholic, so, maybe there's still hope. Let's talk about international Catholic news. And again, about the abortion thing, I'll clarify a few things on the overall abortion in society here after the EU thing, where I'm also going to clarify a few things on ecumenicism after the massive mistake section. And I think I already clarified enough at least enough for today, on same-sex attraction, gender dysphoria, and LGBTQ plus issues within the church, in terms of how there's a proper line between respecting somebody for who they are and respecting God for his creation and the church God has set in place with that. Anyways, let's get started with Cardinal Sarah. Sarah was the head of the Congregation for Divine Worship. He turned 75 last year, submitted his resignation. The Pope accepted his resignation earlier this week. In fact, a little bit, a day or so after I released the previous rundown. And the Pope did so without naming a successor for the Cardinal, which is unusual. Normally, if you're the head of the department, then the Pope's going to name the successor before accepting your resignation, but he didn't. And now the Pope and the Cardinal have a history of disagreement, particularly because Cardinal Sarah is considered to be a potential pope. In fact, many people thought that he could be pope instead of Pope Francis when the conclave met before, of course, electing Francis to the papacy. Cardinal Sarah is loved by traditional Catholics, or at least more traditional, those who lean towards the traditional side in Catholicism. He's known for his widespread support of Ad Orientem masses. And of course, that's the old way, facing the east, away from the people. I also prefer that because it makes more sense theologically and historically speaking with the church. He's also known for speaking out against same-sex marriage, among other things. Again, we already hashed through the whole same-sex marriage and the church thing and how there's progress to be made in terms of help for same-sex people, but we can never allow same-sex marriage or unions within the Catholic Church. That's one of the things that Cardinal Sarah has also said. Earlier this week, last Sunday, actually, a man went to church 45 minutes before Mass started. He suffered a heart attack right where you see him here in this photo and fell down and collapsed. That Mass that was 45 minutes from then was then set as his funeral Mass. They covered him with a white garment, put a candle at his feet, as you can see there. Contacted the next of kin, had them there, did the funeral, everything like that. Now, the reason they did this might seem a little odd, but the reason they did this was that anybody who dies not in a hospital in Mexico has to be looked at by the coroner before the body is moved, which makes sense. But we have Mass going on in 45 minutes from now, and the guy just died. So what do we do? And so what they ended up doing was just making it a funeral Mass and waiting for the coroner to come. And anyways, they like we said, determined that he had a heart attack, and that's how he died. He literally walked to his own funeral, which not many people can say that. Of course, you can't say it if you're dead, but you know what I mean. Let's move on to the EU. Talking about abortion in Poland. Now, the EU Parliament voted 455 to 145, basically slapping Poland on the wrist for being like, oh, you banned abortion. That's so bad. It's not bad, obviously. We all know that. But earlier, Poland struck down a 1993 law that permitted abortion for fetal abnormalities. Now Poland only allows abortion in the cases of rape, incest, or risk to the mother. Wish it could be that way in the United States, but, you know, it's the United States. What can I say? But at least Poland's standing up against the EU. What can I say? Speaking of countries near Poland, let's move on to Germany. The head of the German Bishops' Conference, which, if you've watched enough of these episodes, you know almost every week we have something new with the Germans and what thing they want to talk about to allow Protestants into communion or have communion services with Protestants or things of that sort. And the bishop who leads the conference said that he wouldn't deny communion to Protestants. He doesn't care. And he says if one of his parishes did this, the parish wouldn't have a negative consequence for allowing a Protestant to receive communion. Of course, the Vatican Congregation for Divine Faith has a problem with this. Protestants can't receive communion because they don't believe the same thing we do. Speaking of Protestants and communion, let's fly halfway across the world to Brazil, where a priest celebrated, not really, Mass with a Presbyterian minister, who you can see in the purple stole on Ash Wednesday. And the Presbyterian minister said part of the Eucharistic prayer. Both received communion, as we can see him right here holding a piece of bread, not the body of Christ. This is not a valid Mass, obviously. So the priest has since been removed from the parish. And now my asterisk on ecumenicism that I wanted to make was that we really do need to make progress in the Protestant Catholic sphere. And in some of these are really great examples of attempts to do that, but not executed in the best way. We could have a group dinner together and sit down and have a conversation about faith, and put out a joint statement, and maybe even have like a council type thing together. That would all be great. But sharing the communion with somebody who doesn't believe the same thing of the communion as us, we can't do that. And if by doing that, it hinders our communion with orthodoxy. Why would any Orthodox want to have communion with Catholicism? Communion as in reunification of the churches with Catholicism, if Catholicism isn't upholding the real presence of Jesus Christ in the Eucharist. And as shown by things such as this, if it were widespread, which it isn't, but if Catholicism were to allow things such as this, sort of like if Germany was the worldwide church, then we would have some problems and probably not reach communion with Orthodoxy for a long time. I mean, if Germany was the worldwide church, I'd become Orthodox in about 2 seconds flat, because the Protestants can't receive communion. They don't believe the same thing. So we have to once again balance. This is the key to this week. If you get nothing else out of this week, is balance. We need to balance the love that we show for people with gender dysphoria and LGBTQ plus tendencies, and those in that community. They really need our love and support, but they also need holy guidance on how to live the faith properly. Same thing with abortion. Same thing with abortion. We need to properly correct those in political power who say that abortion is okay out of one side and say that they're Catholic out of the other. We need to lovingly crack down on that. And some of the bishops have begun to do so in the United States on that, but not all of them yet. And so that's one of the things. And again, in ecumenicism, the same exact thing. Love while also being holy chastisement, saying we want to be in communion with you, but we cannot give up the fact that Jesus Christ is truly present in the Eucharist, and therefore you can't receive communion unless you believe that. It's just that simple. So again, love on all fronts is the goal, while also being just in terms of how we exercise that. That's all for now. I've been Chris Dixon, InfoWeather Catholic Media. This has been the Rundown. We'll be back again next weekend. Pretty light liturgical week next week as well, but I will pick back up as we head into the week after, and the week after, and the week after, as we have a couple solemnities in a couple weeks before Easter, and then we have Holy Week, and then Easter itself. I've been Chris Dixon, InfoWeather Catholic Media. Already said that, but that's okay.